Wow. St. Paul at his best, huh? So what was he talking about? Well, let me start out with a little story. Not really a story, it actually happened. But I was involved in a mission church about 10, 15 years ago. We started up, and we didn't really do a whole lot of advertising or anything, but we started to have people join us. It was great. We were growing. We even had a couple from Chile that came to the United States to be missionaries who started worshiping with us. And they did our music, and it was just a phenomenal time. Well, we thought we were doing so well that we wrote our bylaws and our constitution, and the meeting where we all were going to sign it and say, yes, we're going to be a congregation, only half the people signed it. And I just was stunned that we only had half of our people sign that. And immediately after that, people started dropping off. Our attendance went down. It finally got to the point, well, there were a couple other things that went on, but we finally got to the point where there were only 5 of us worshiping on a Sunday. So we voted to close because it just wasn't good stewardship to spend that amount of funds for just 5 people. So after that, I got thinking about what happened there. And it occurred to me that many of the folks who joined us actually came from churches where they were unhappy. So they joined us thinking, oh, we've got this new little church that we can be part of. But they weren't really thinking of it as a church. They were thinking of it as a club. Because when it got serious, the time to make a real commitment, they turned away. That's a serious division in a church, isn't it? Where half the people really are not committed. But that's not really unusual, I don't think. It's just that some churches are big enough to survive that. We were not. But I tell you that story because divisions in the church have been there ever since the beginning. And that's what Paul is talking about. See, Paul went out, and didn't he go to the synagogues first to preach? And then he went to the Gentiles. Well, if we remember in Acts, Paul had gone to Thessalonica, went to the temple, or to the synagogue there. He went to preach to them, shared the message, and they ran him out of town. They just didn't want to hear it. So we had this huge division between the Jews and the Gentiles in Thessalonica. He moves on to Berea. He does the same thing there, and they invite him to come back. They actually were asking him questions. They were digging into the scriptures to verify what he was saying was true. They were much more accepting. There wasn't that hard division between Gentile and Jew there. So what Paul is trying to point out is that hard, really difficult division had to be overcome. So just a clue even more into our reading here, where it says that Jesus preached peace to the far off. In the Old Testament, those who were called the far off were the Gentiles. And in the Old Testament, if you were called the people that were near, you were actually the Jews. You were the ones close to God's covenant. So now he's saying Jesus preached peace to the far off and peace to the near. That was one of the verses there. But if you look at it in the Greek, it's pretty awesome because it actually says Jesus was sharing the glad tidings with the Gentiles, or the good news, as we know, the gospel. That's what the real interpretation of it is. He was preaching the gospel to them, and they were receiving it. And especially in Berea, it really grew. It blossomed there. So here is Paul trying to break down this division, trying to point out to these people that they are one in Christ now. And of course, he's having difficulties in some churches or synagogues, and others, they're being acceptable. But I told you that story about the divisions of our little mission church because doesn't that still continue to today? Our home church has gone through at least 3 major divisions that I can remember. And we have always survived them. And I think there's a good reason for that. Because once all the strife just moves away or gets washed away, so to speak, everybody gets focused back on the cross again. They don't dwell on that. They don't just keep going back to it. They realize, yes, we are one body. Yes, we are one in Christ. That's really an awesome thing. Our congregation has been there 60 years now. It's amazing. I don't know if you know this, but the average lifespan of a congregation is 40 years. So if you see a congregation that lasted 100 years, that is amazing. And there are some around. There's some right in this area. So what Paul is trying to share is we are no longer Jews and Gentiles. We are all one. We are all one in the blood of Christ. But those divisions, when they happen, there's another division going on there, a bigger one. Because when we get caught up in those things, we're getting caught up in a division between us and God as well. Think about the first commandment. When we get caught up in a division, we're being selfish, right? We want it to be our way. We have forgotten the priority of why the church is there. We've forgotten that God is the real reason that we are there. That cross, that message that we're supposed to get out is our purpose. We get caught up in these little bureaucratic discussions or debates. And sometimes they get a little ugly. Sometimes people leave. But we've lost the focus then. We've lost our commitment to God when that happens. Luckily, our congregation always seems to get past it fairly quickly. And they move on. And, as congregations go, you have your declines in attendance, and then they suddenly get re-energized and things take off again. I hope we're on that take off and get energized again, because that'd be pretty neat. But that's where God comes in. God washed away all of that with the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. His blood washes away all those divisions, doesn't it? Even if tomorrow we have the same thing happen again, and we get past it, what happened? Jesus washed it all away again. We're brand new each and every day. We don't have to keep reliving these things or carrying that burden, no matter what that burden is, because Jesus has already taken care of it for us. And if you really believe that and take it to heart, you can have a pretty joyful life. Unfortunately, some people carry a lot of baggage. Now, I will tell you one thing that really breaks my heart. And I'll kind of lead into it with a discussion the Pharisees had with Jesus. If you remember, they challenged him that he was driving out spirits in the name of Beelzebub, the devil, Satan. And what did Jesus say to them? How could I be doing that? A house divided against itself cannot stand. And that's what happens with a church, right? If it's divided against itself, it will not stand. So a church that can heal, that can forgive each other, that can forgive our brothers and sisters, will survive and will grow. But leading into that, today, I don't want to say today, in our time, I've seen a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, I've seen ministers, pastors, who preach hate. Can you think of situations recently? I can think of several in the last 10 years. It's kind of calmed down a little bit. And I'm talking about race. How often have we seen people actually on both sides of the fence get up and preach about how bad the other side is? They're not preaching, let's forgive. let's shake hands, let's move on, let's love each other. No. They're preaching about how oppressed they are or how offended they are. And I think there's a real art to being offended, just like anything else. You practice it enough, you can pull it off pretty quickly, right? But it really breaks my heart when I see that happen, because if they really believed what they were supposed to be preaching, the love of Jesus Christ, that would never come out of their mouths. They would be telling their people to love one another, to get on the bandwagon, and forgive each other. That's not what happens. That's a very heartbreaking situation. But it happens whether it's in the church, whether it happens in politics. It happens every day. It even happens in families, doesn't it? And sometimes we just can't move past what's happened to forgive each other. I see people, I have a niece. It breaks my heart, but she will not let go of things. She will never let go of things. And it's unfortunate because she has a great life. She really is blessed. But why do you hold on to this baggage? Why do you hold things against other people that really don't matter? I don't understand. But some people are built that way. And I hope that someday the message of forgiveness gets through to her. It's not like she didn't grow up in the church and hear it every Sunday. But let's face it, we all know people like that, don't we? And it's hurtful, especially when it's in your family. When there's that division in your family, when everybody's supposed to be blood thicker than water. And yet we can't do it. It's a terrible thing. But that's why Jesus came, isn't it? That's why Jesus came, to invigorate us, to save us. Because we cannot do it on our own. And that is a perfect example of the divisions that we have in our lives. We just can't get there without his blood and his sacrifice. So I ask you to think about that, to carry that in your heart, to understand the joy that really is there for each and every one of us if we could just forgive. And one last thought. I don't remember the man who said this. It probably was back in the 1800s. He basically said if people could really embrace forgiveness, we could empty all the asylums. Think about that. How many people are mentally confused by these burdens they carry that they can't accept forgiveness for themselves? And if they could just do that, how much brighter our lives would be. So I ask you, for the sake of Jesus Christ, that you would remember to forgive, to try to work past things as quickly as you can. Do not carry burdens that are not necessary, because the cross has carried all the burdens for us. In Jesus Christ, amen.